Okay, so we're done with our column sorting. So we're going to leave this. We're going to leave this. So what I want to talk a little bit about are APIs, okay, which is a term probably all of you have heard of. Probably some of you know what it means and some of you don't. So let's talk a bit about, well, what is an API first of all, and why is this something we need to know about? What does API actually even mean?
It stands for Application Programming Interface.
Okay, yes. And if you were to go home tonight and you're having dinner with your roommates or your families and they say, so what'd you talk about from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock today? Well, we talked about application programming interfaces. And what's their response to that going to be? Huh? Exactly. Huh? What the heck does that mean? So how could you take the term application programming interface and explain it to whoever you're going to have dinner with tonight in a way that they might actually understand? What does it mean in plain everyday language? That would be one option. So Ryan will be eating alone in the corner. What does an API actually mean in everyday language? What's the purpose of it?
So it's like a service you can use.
Okay. Can you give me an example? A service we could use, yeah.
Like the payment gateways, we could use those APIs. We don't have to build it ourselves, they build it for us.
Okay, yep, that's good. That's a great example. John?
It's like a library with pre-written attributes and methods for us, so we don't have to write them ourselves.
Exactly. An API is nothing more than an existing library of code that another application can use. So it's basically a way for two different applications to talk to each other. That's what you can tell your dinner partner tonight. Ryan, so you're not eating alone anymore. Think you can manage that?
No, I still will.
You still eat alone, okay. So it's a way for applications to talk to each other. So something like a payment gateway is a great example. Rather than write the code ourselves to check someone's credit card and take the payment, we use an API, we use a service that our customer has to pay for, and the API does the work for us, rather than us having to build it, okay? Let's look at something like this. Let's go here. Most sites you use every day have a bunch of APIs built in, okay? How long do you think it took me to generate this map? Imagine the amount of work that went into drawing this map. How long did it take me?
Probably 5 minutes.
Probably 5 minutes, right? Because I just used Google's API, right? They have a tool, a free code library that will generate a map for you. So why would we spend time building one when we can just let Google do it for us? Okay, so this would be one of the most popular ones. What other? So payment gateways, Google Maps. What are some other popular APIs that you see or use all the time? Jess?
YouTube's API.
You got it. You're not going to create your own video player. If you want to show a video, you're going to leverage YouTube's API. Plug it in. There you go. There's your video. Okay, what else? So, Josh? Sorry? Yep, Google Ads, right? Again, you're not writing your own code. We're going to leverage their code library.
How is it much of an API? It's just one tag, right? iframe?
It's not an iframe. It was originally, but the code is still coming from them. It's a service they make available that we plug into, and we're leveraging their functionality. What other kinds of things? What other APIs do we see? Google makes a few others. You've touched on many of their big ones.
Like Google search, we don't need to, we go W3 school, it will search on Google.
Okay, so let's, right here. So, because I'm so important, we can search for me, right? We already know, you can tell right away, how can you tell that's Google? This is Google's API doing the search. Yeah, because it looks exactly like, the search results from Google, right? And if we scroll down to the very bottom, what do you expect to see at the bottom of this list? Right? Powered by Google. So Google makes all of these APIs available. So we've got Maps, we've got YouTube, we've got Search, we've got Ads. There's one other big one from Google. What other API do we see all over the place?
The CAPTCHA you were doing?
Okay, yeah, well, so Google owns CAPTCHA. One other one that's big.
jQuery.
Yeah, okay, so there's jQuery. Google and other social media providers. Actually, let me just go here. No, that's not what I want. The other big one is login, right? Log in with your Google account. So they're using it for authentication. So Google makes all those APIs available. Facebook, what kind of APIs does Facebook make available? What code do they give us that we can leverage and use and embed on our applications? Like button?
The share page?
Share?
Login.
Login? What about Twitter? What do they give us? Feeds, right? So all of these companies make their APIs available so we can plug into them. Now, why would they do this, right? Why would they give us those tools really for no cost?
To promote their website.
Right. You know, it's promotion for them, right? It also helps drive traffic to their applications, but as developers, it's a pretty good deal for us. Okay? So part of our responsibility when a client or a project manager comes to us and says, we need certain functionality included in this application, before you jump ahead and just start coding it, part of your responsibility is to ask yourself, well, is there already an API out there that we can leverage that already has this functionality? Why would we spend time and money coding something when that function might be available to us? You know, we need something like a stock ticker. Well, there's going to be an API for doing those things. We need some sort of calculations done. There might be an API for this. So one of the things we want to do is be aware of what kinds of services and APIs are out there that will save us time and functionality when we're building our applications. Okay? And usually the first place to look are the big providers like Google, Facebook, Yahoo, Microsoft. Those are probably among the biggest. Okay? And one of the other things that we wind up doing a lot once we learn how to build basic applications is we also have to look at how do we get our applications to talk to one another. Okay? So something like we build a shopping cart, but then once people buy stuff, well, maybe there's all kinds of companies that are going to actually manufacture and ship those products to the clients. Okay, so Brighto buys something online, it goes into Sakib's shopping cart, Sakib gets the order, but it's John's company that has to make it and ship the item. So Sakib has it in his database, John needs it in his database. How are we going to get the Brighto's order from Sakib to John so John can make and ship the item?
They're sitting next to each other.
Yeah, maybe John's company, maybe John's warehouse, maybe John's retired to the Cayman Islands because they don't want to pay taxes. So Sakib has the order, all the information about who Brighto is, what he bought, but John needs that order in his system. How could John get that information from Sakib?
API.
Right, so John's going to build an API that will accept the orders, and he'll give Sakib the documentation. Here's how you send me an order. So that order can automatically go as soon as Brighto pays and puts his credit card in, Sakib saves the order. That order automatically gets sent to John. It goes in his database. John's company can produce and ship the item. And also send back Sakib a notice saying, here, we shipped it and here's the tracking number. So when the customer logs into Sakib's site, they can put in click on the tracking number and see, hey, where's my, Brighto saying, hey, where's my item you charged me for? Okay. So when we want to move data back and forth electronically between two different databases, an API is the way to do that. There's no user interface. There's nothing visual. It's just a code library that will allow two programs to talk back and forth and communicate. Okay. So when we build enterprise level systems, there's a lot of different pieces and applications, and we have a lot of APIs going back and forth that allow us to share information. I can actually show you, if you give me a second, an example of one, of what this schema looks like now that I think about it. So this is a project. I have a friend of mine who's managed some very large IT web projects. This was a project he managed for CP Rail. And I'll show you what the architecture and the infrastructure looked like. Whoops. So this was a multi-million-dollar project. CP Rail used to have all of their trains. Believe it or not, they didn't have a website for customers to be able to book a shipment online or see where their shipment was on train. So they planned a few years ago to build this web portal. So if you shipped merchandise with a CP Rail train, every one of these is a separate application. So all of these boxes on here are separate applications. They all had to share data. So the way they did it was with APIs between them, and that way they could pass data back and forth. You see how many, and many of these were existing products that they simply went and bought from a vendor, but those products had to talk to other products they were buying and using. So APIs doing all of this integration. They didn't actually code very much themselves. Most of it was buying existing web packages and then figuring out how to integrate them into one solution. So the API development allowed those applications to talk to one another. Okay? So this is typical of what an enterprise level solution might look like. So we're not really going to focus today on building our own APIs, but what we are going to look at is how we can leverage and use some existing APIs that are out there. So the first thing we're going to do, first I'm going to get my monitor to come back. Hang on just a second. Sorry, I don't know what's going on here. So the first thing we're going to do, if you can open up your footer.php, we're going to add a really simple API call into our footer. To open up your footer.php page, okay, that's better. So I'm going to open up my footer. And what we want to do is take a very simple weather widget, weather API. I think I put the link on Blackboard. So if you go to Blackboard and open up this link, it says Weather Network Widget. So if you open up this link, it'll take you here. So here's probably the world's simplest API, right? We want to show the weather for a current location. We want to keep it up to date. Rather than build this ourselves, we can just take this API. It doesn't even use PHP, it's all JavaScript. So what we want is a little widget like this to appear down in the bottom of our application. And it will stay up to date and show the weather for whatever location you choose. And every time you refresh the page, it will do an update and get the current weather. So they couldn't make this really any easier. So the first thing it asks you to do is select the size. I'm going to default it. I want the smallest widget because it's just going in our footer. select up to 6 locations. So pick any city anywhere around the world you want to show the weather. I think I'm going to pick my, I would suggest, pick my hometown. So you can pick your own hometown anywhere in the world. It's saying, do we want PC or mobile? I'll just pick PC. The background color by default will be white. I might want to change that. We can specify whether it's Celsius or Fahrenheit. I will check the I agree and click accept. So here's a preview of my widget. That's what it's going to look like. So you can customize it however you like. And then it says, copy the code below and put it in your HTML to insert the widget. So if you notice, just creates a div tag and they use JavaScript. It passes in their location ID and it makes the call, passes it to this URL, widget.twn.com, and it will return back that little widget. So I'm just going to grab everything in there, grab that whole block of code, copy it to my clipboard, and I'm going to want that to appear in the footer of my site. So in here, we've got this inside of our footer. I need to do a bit of wrapping because I want the widget to appear off to the right. So I'm going to create a container div for this. So I'll open and close my tag. So I've added line 3 and I've added line 7. And I'm going to put this inside of its own div. See how wide is this? It's about 4 columns wide. So I'll put our original text inside of a div that's, say, 4 columns wide. And I'll create a second div that's 4 columns wide. And this is where I want to paste my weather widget. So now I'll just paste in all of that JavaScript. So this should generate our weather widget off to the right of our original text. I'm not sure exactly where it's going to show up, but we will see. So it doesn't look great. I think it's too big. But there it is. So we've made a call with JavaScript to the Weather Network's API, and it returns back this little box. It's styled. And they've also made it a link, right? If I click on it, it should actually load their site to that location. Now it is too big, so I wonder if I can shrink it. So I'm just going to go back to their widget page.
You can choose the last one. This is smaller.
This one's smaller?
Yeah.
Ah.
But can you change the width
Yeah.
over there?
Yeah.
For some reason, that's not enabled. Those boxes aren't enabled. I'm not sure why.
Maybe it's just to tell you the dimensions if you're building your website. This is how big it's going to be.
Ah,
change it.
so.
Yeah.
So if I change it and use that style instead, we'll see. Oh, I need to do it again. So what did they do that's different? Oh, I think this is the style here. They just have an ID, I think, of. Yeah, that would fit better. So they just used a different ID number that represents a different style. So that fits a lot better in our footer. So that's about the world's simplest API call. Go on there, and many of them are like this. You go to the API provider, you read through the documents, and in many cases, you can literally copy the code from their site and paste it into your own. They'll even generate most of the code for you. We're going to add one more API call on here. I'll put this code back up if anybody needs to see it. But don't type it all. Make sure you generate it from the weather network.
Most APIs use something called curl. What exactly is that?
Good question. So curl is when we need to send a GET or POST request to another URL in order to get data back. But we want it to happen, we don't want it to happen in the browser. We don't want the user to see the other page. We want our code to, behind the scenes, call another URL and then get a response back. So curl is a function that allows us to call another URL and interpret whatever comes back. Okay? I'll show you an example of when we would use this. So last year at the college, we had a big conference where we had Chris Hadfield, the astronaut, speaking here. So what we had was we had two different systems. We had people coming, teachers coming from all over the province to Georgian to see the conference. Okay, and we had all kinds of different events. So users could sign up for that conference and they would pay their registration fee, cost them about $300. So the college already has an existing shopping cart. So if somebody is a teacher at Centennial College and they were to come to Barrie, they would sign up, they'd pay their $300, and it would save their registration. The problem was we also had a separate application that was used for scheduling the conference. So if Lucy was going to come, you could see all of the speakers and all of the events, and you could register for different events. That was a separate database. So we had this challenge. You'd sign up and you paid here, but then we also needed you in this other system so that you could do all your own scheduling and see your events. Fortunately, the scheduling system that we used, and this is coming, I will come back to your this is answering your CURL. We used this kind of neat software called Sketch.org. Worked really well. But we actually hired Sukhdeep, who was a programming student, he was a co-op student, so for his co-op, he was involved in helping us integrate, pick software and integrate all this stuff. So his main job was managing the registrations. How were we going to get the registrations out of our e-commerce database and in here so users could pick their sessions and register for things? We didn't want to have to retype everybody's registration. We weren't paying him to do data entry. So fortunately, go in here, these guys have an API. So Sukhdeep had to read through the documentation, and it describes all of the functions in the API. So here are all of the different methods, public methods, that any program could call. Okay? So we had, for example, a method called user add. So this was the method we needed. When Lucy paid, we then needed to program our shopping cart to send Lucy's information to the user add method with your name, email, and all of those things. So here's the definition. So basically, to call this, you just needed to send this URL. Okay? So this has to happen behind the scenes. We didn't want to make the users go here and sign themselves up again. This should happen automatically beneath the hood. So we could use the CURL function to send a request to this URL, and we would pass in a key, which was our identifier, and then username, email, password, and all this information. This API method would then save an account for that user to the scheduling database, and also email that user their credentials and a link so they could log in and then say, oh, this looks interesting, I want to sign up for this, and I want to sign up for this event with the schedule. So rather than have somebody type it, we use their API. So CURL lets one web page call another one and interpret the response. So many APIs work this way. I was doing some work on another application that was exactly the same. We needed to call other pages using CURL and then interpret the response. That's basically how Payment Gateway works, right? You click Save. We don't take the user to the Payment Gateway. We keep them on our website. But we use CURL to call their payment page, send them the credit card number, and then we read back what kind of response did we get. Was the credit card approved? Do we save the user's order? Or was the credit card declined? And if so, why? So we can print that message to the screen. So we use CURL for those calls. Does that answer your question? Make sense? Okay. So we're going to do one more thing down here. I also want to add very simple Facebook sharing. Okay, so we could add the Facebook like and share buttons onto the bottom. Pretty simple thing. Many people, if they're going to ask you to build a website, they're probably going to ask you to integrate social media links into it. Okay, so Facebook also has, just like the Weather Network has APIs, Google has APIs, these guys have APIs. Facebook has a whole ton of APIs that we can plug into. Getting them's pretty simple. It's pretty much as simple as going here. So let's do a search online. If you just search for Facebook Share API. Do a quick search. Whatever search engine you use, probably this link's going to come up first. So we go to the developers.facebook.com into the documentation to look at the share button. So I'll click on that. If you want to go there directly, just go to developer.facebook.com. So this is what it will look like. So the first thing it wants is it wants the URL of your page. So just go to your athlete's page and copy your URL. And in the URL to share, delete their sample and paste in your URL. You can change the format, right? You've got all of these options. So you can play around. It will give you a preview. We probably want it to be fairly short because our footer is not very tall. So, you know, you could just have that. Up to you what format you use. I'll go with the default, the button count. And then here's the really complicated part. We click Get Code. So here's what they want us to do. We need to link to their JavaScript SDK. So we're going to copy that section. They suggest right after the body tag. That's fine. The body tag is in our header.php, so we can put this link there. So just copy that code. And we'll open up our header.php, and we'll find the body tag. So I'll open header.
What is SDK?
Software development kit. So that their JavaScript SDK, if we want to look at what that's all about. So it basically lets us, if we link that, we can then use it for most of their APIs will use that link. So we're basically enabling Facebook's JavaScript library. So by putting it in the header, that's a good place for it. So then if we want to include other APIs on here, we can from Facebook. So I'll just paste that code in underneath my body tag in the header. We don't have to change anything. It just connects to Facebook's JavaScript library.
So depending on how many like API you want to use.
They will all use that. They will all, if they're all from Facebook, let's say you want the comments box, the login, the share, you only need that on the header and they all can use it. You don't need to repeat it.
Use like different company on YouTube and it's gonna be different.
Yes, it would be. So you may well have links to different SDKs from different providers, yes. Okay, so I'll upload the header. So that was part one, was include the link to Facebook's JavaScript.
What's the second one? We can place everything.
So place the code for your plugin where you want it to appear on the page. So this, notice the class is Facebook share button. That actually generates the sharing button. So we need to copy this and paste it into our footer. So we're going to put this in the middle of the footer and we'll move the weather widget over to the right. So we'll create another div in between our text and our weather widget. So copy this in section 2. And we'll go back to our footer. So I'll open up my footer. So after my first div, I'll create one in the middle. And again, I'll make it a small 4-column. Bootstrap uses a grid system that's 12 columns wide. So if I make each of these small 4, each section will be the same width. So now I'll just paste in that code from Facebook. This should generate a share button in the middle of my footer. So my text and date will be on the left, our weather will be on the right, and our share button will appear in the middle. So I'll re-upload my footer. And don't forget to re-upload your header. because we added the JavaScript links in the header. So now we get our Facebook share button in the middle. So we haven't written any code at all. All we're basically doing is copying and pasting. So if I want to try and share this, I'll probably have to log into Facebook, which is fine. If I click share, it automatically takes me here. So now I can say something. So now I've shared that on Facebook, so it updates automatically, right? So Lucy, that's the JavaScript in action, right? Their JavaScript checks the URL and it checks the Facebook database for how many times has this link been shared, and then it will always give me an up-to-date count. So we don't have to code it, that's what the SDK does. Facebook does all of that under the hood and lets us use that functionality. Okay. So adding most of these features from Facebook is really easy. We just go to the developer document page, look up what type of API we want to use. You know, we want the embedded posts. So it asks you for whatever information that particular API method needs, and then they've got a get code button. And you copy, again, follow the instructions and copy and paste the code into your application. Now, if we were going to include another Facebook API, we don't need the first section, we don't need the SDK link, because our SDK link is now in the header. So all our pages already are now connected to the SDK. So we don't need that repeated if it's in our header, which is shared. We would only need the actual output of our API call. So these would be APIs sort of in our simplest form. Okay. Questions from anybody so far?
I have a question for the Bootstrap.
Yep.
So I looked into Bootstrap code, and it's a collection of CSS kind of codes. And I was wondering if we can change the position of that share buttons even after we use the Bootstrap.
Yeah, so let's say I wanted to push it over a bit more. If I made this column a little wider, so that if I make that 5 and that 3, that should make the left column wider and should push. So I'm just using a different Bootstrap class. I'm not sure what it'll do. We'll try it. I think it should push this over a bit. So that's now worth 5 columns wide, and that's the 6th column. So Bootstrap has this 12-column grid system by default. So you can set any item to be anywhere from 1 to 12 of the columns wide.
Can I add my CSS?
Yes, you can still use your own CSS on top of it. So if you want to make your own custom classes, you can create styles.css and put any classes you want in there and use it in addition. Yes, you can. Okay, so you're not limited to doing it. I just find using Bootstrap's fairly easy, but you could use your own classes on top if you want to. So the term API is an old term that we should probably get rid of. So it basically comes back from the days when Windows was first created. The idea was you had the Windows operating system and then you had programs like Word or Excel. So an API was something like save or print. It was a little program that sat on top of Windows. Every program, you could save a file from Excel. You could save a file from Word. So rather than having to write a different save function in all of those, they just had a common save program that Excel, Word, PowerPoint, they all knew how to use. So save was the bridge between those two programs. Right? I've got create a file in Word, I want to save it to the Windows file system. So we've kept this old programming term API around, but now it really just means letting any two applications talk together in some way, usually. So doing this is sort of in its most basic form. Doing this is in a more complex form, where we're actually sharing data back and forth.
Isn't it more of a web service?
A web service is really is a form of API, right? APIs don't have to run on the web, although most APIs now are web-based, right? So we want to share information between applications. APIs would be how we would do it. Okay. It's time for us to take a pause. It's 3 o'clock. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a break here. We'll come back in 10 minutes, and then we want to modify this page. We also want to add the reCAPTCHA API to our registration form to keep out spammers. So we're going to do that, and then I will give you your lab, which is going to involve basically adding a comment box to a web page. Okay? So we'll take a 10-minute break here.